All right.
Tem muito, nadinha dele que comedinha, mano. Eu vou dificultar uma rua de 20 anos. Você traz uma destinação.
All right, guys, welcome back. All right,
welcome back. This is BlueCapCyberSecurity. So today we're going to be looking at the first half of 2026, the cyber attacks that happened. We're going to be looking at them in retrospect, especially the major ones that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at the major ones, what happened, what did not happen, what were the measures that that ought to be taken, but unfortunately they were not taken, that led to such cyber attacks. So those are the things we're going to be doing. So the first on the list, let's just do a brief overview, is that in the first half of 2026, there were several cyber attacks of various kinds, various categories, and so on and so forth. So, and on that, 89% were associated with insecure accelerated attacks, 47% were associated with ransomware, and 91% were associated with phishing attacks. So that's just a brief overview of how these particular incidents, or a larger perspective of how these particular incidents actually happen in the first half of 2026. But that's not our main focus. Our main focus is to look at it a little in depth, so go a little in depth of how these attacks happen before we actually conclude on what we are going to be looking at in this second half of the year, or what should be our expectation in this second half of the year. Because if we've seen a particular pattern happen, and this particular pattern that happened, maybe we do not put it under check as early as possible, the possibility that this particular pattern might repeat itself are likely going to be very high. So that's what we need to put into consideration as a people or as individuals, either as a corporate organization, business, or individuals, most especially SMEs, because big corporation or big multinational, they might have huge budget for security, but majority of SMEs, there might not be much budget, or there might not even be budget for security. So which means that SMEs, or small and medium corporation, are going to be the major targets of these attackers, of these cyber adversaries. So it's the reason why we must learn how to actually help these small and medium corporation to get better and stand strong, and the rest of them. So let's get started. Let's get started with the number one on the list. Now, the first on the list is the nation-state geopolitical attacks. That means these are attacks that are, let me use the word, that they are state-sponsored. They are not just private individuals who actually, or one organization that's actually carrying out this kind of attacks. They are sponsored by state or government organizations actually has a hand in it. A good example is what we all know about North Korea. They are fond of carrying out this kind of attacks continually. You understand? They are fond of carrying out these kind of attacks continually, which is not actually something that all over the world they are known for actually what carrying out uh, this kind of things. So state-linked and geopolitical motivated operations targeting government infrastructure, targeting healthcare and other kind of critical infrastructure. Now on this, under the state sponsored or geopolitical attacks, 6 incidents were actually x-rayed on this, and the 6 that we x-rayed includes the 6 incidents that we x-rayed include the harms, include the first, which is the striker, and it happened on March 12th. On March 12th, 2026, it affected a medical technology, and those that were actually behind it were the Handala Iran-linked activist group. Now, here are the harm that was actually caused? It cost 200,000, over 200,000 plus corporate devices simultaneously factory reset across 79 countries, production and shipping disrupted, and it hits their first quarterly earnings negatively. Now, what does this mean? It means that over 200,000 devices were placed or remotely formatted to factory reset in about 79 countries. And you know what that means? Just imagine the device you are holding in your hand now is being set to factory reset. Therefore means that every data on that particular device has been wiped. That's the implication. Now, you know what this will actually affect? To affect production, shipping, and the rest of them. And as soon as production and shipping is affected, it will actually affect your earnings. So what are the root cause or the things that will actually led to this? One is retaliatory geopolitical incident targeting tied to US strike in Iran. Insufficient segmentation of device management control. Now this is like the root cause and the negligence. Recall that that between the first half of 2026, the first quarter of 2026, that the US and Iran actually had conflict, that there were a lot of airstrikes here and there, and this was actually what led to this Iran activist group actually carrying out these attacks. So that was the root cause. Then failure on organization is that there were no segmentation of device management control. Now, when we say segmentation of device management control, is that what we say is that some devices should not be on a particular network. When we say on a particular network, which means that there should be no remote access control to these devices, or they should not be connected to the internet for some certain reasons, maybe due to the level of sensitivity of the information that they actually contain. They should not be connected to the internet. Then two, or what could have actually prevented it is MDM factory reset safeguards. That means even though this device can be reset to factory settings, there were no MDM factory reset safeguards. That means all of these data were left on these devices and there were no offline immutable backups. You know, when they are in offline backups now, it therefore means that if a particular device is being reset, with the offline backups being brought in, you now start to copy files back to the device now because everything on the device has been wiped. It therefore means this is now what I'm saying now is an incident response now. Let's assume that maybe after this particular incident happened, since there were no backup, it therefore means that they could not recover a lot of their data. And this was a major issue. Geographical threat monitoring for defense adjacent firms. So that was another things. Those were other things that were not in place that actually what made this particular attack to be very heavy on this corporation or these companies. So let's look at the second incident that actually happened. The second incident that actually happened is the European Commission. This particular incident was affected a government corporation and it happened on 24th of March 2026. And till date, no group actually claimed responsibility. But what were the harms caused and what were the losses that were actually recorded? Is cloud infrastructure hosting the Europa platform was targeted. Early findings suggested that data was exfiltrated. An incident was contained swiftly. So you can see here now that this particular incident was actually what contained swiftly. That means incident response was fast, and they had some of the things that will actually made them to respond to this incident in a quick manner. So what was the root cause? The root cause or the negligence that actually happened was that a cloud infrastructure security gap, which is the full technical details which they were not actually disclosed. The full technical details was not disclosed by this agency. Being a government agency, there are a lot of things that you might not hear from them. Now, what could have prevented it? Cloud security hardening and rapid containment protocols, largely why the damage still limited. I think cloud security hardening, the previous organization, which was the first organization that we actually looked at, they didn't have this protocol, and the damage was massive. But on this particular one, since they had that, the damage was not very serious, or was not it was not something that was heavy on them. So it was easily contained. You understand? So that's what happened on this particular second organization. So let's move to the third, which is the Poland energy grid and water utility. Poland energy grid and water utility. Now, this was a what an energy grid actually look like. It therefore is the powerhouse of electricity. So for it to be attacked, you know what can happen to that particular nation as regards electricity. Water utility, you also know what can actually happen as well. So it was a critical infrastructure in Poland, and the date of this incident was January 2026, and that was when the power grid incident happened. And in May 2026 was the one that was associated with water utility actually happened, and the people that claimed responsibility was Electron. The group that claimed responsibility was Electron, which was associated with Russia, or they were linked with Russia. You know, the Russia-Ukraine incident. So they just felt that one of the people that should be recipient or the negative beneficiary of the Russian-Ukraine war should be this Poland government agency. So what were the harm that we actually caused? And what we lost is operational technology was disrupted and equipment was damaged across roughly 30 energy sites. Water treatment plants separately breached. You understand? Water treatment plants were separately breached. What were the root cause? OT/IT network convergence without adequate segmentation on critical infrastructure. What this means is that, networks were converged without adequate separation on critical infrastructure. That means you brought various networks together to form one, but some critical infrastructure were not actually segmented. Now, when we say segmenting now, it's like, putting some certain things into layers to ensure that if maybe something negative happens to layer 1, it does not affect layer 2 and it does not affect layer 3. So such was the root cause, and it was the negligence that actually made this attack to be successful. So, and what could have actually prevented it? What would have actually prevented it was IT segmentation plus critical infrastructural specific monitoring and incident playbooks. There was no incident playbooks to this particular. There was no incident playbook. There was no incident playbook to this particular event, and it caused a lot of loss. So let's continue to the next, which is the FBI surveillance system. This attack affected. This was an attack that affected the FBI surveillance system. I think by now, unless maybe you are a kid, that's when you will not know what the FBI means. Yes, FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the U.S. law enforcement agency. It's like federal. It's like their federal police. That's what the FBI is. Federal police that handles crime that has to do with state national crime. When crimes leaves province, region, or leaves yes, let me use the word province or regional. It's not a national crime. The FBI are those that actually respond to such kind of crime. And you know what? An attack affecting them, you know what it can lead to. So this particular event happened in April 2026, and it was alleged that it was linked to China state actors. There's a long war between the US and China. The war seems not to end. So this particular event was alleged that it is China-linked state actors that actually was sponsored this attack. And what were the harm or harm that was caused, and what was the thing that we lost is phone numbers wiretap wiretap and surveillance targets potentially exposed triggered a legally mandated congressional disclosure. You know, FBI being an intelligence agency and a federal police body or a federal police organization, law enforcement agency, when they are tracking or when they handle a particular case and they do not have enough details yet, they can wiretap some certain devices of the persons that they are investigating. You can wiretap their phone numbers, place some surveillance system on those particular devices remotely, and when this got exposed, there was need to make it public to Congress and look at this particular incident has happened and so on and so forth. You understand? So sensitive surveillance data was held on an unclassified network. So what this means that details that the FBI believed that it was only in their own hands was now held in an unclassified network. Now, what could have prevented it? One is strict segmentation between classified, sensitive data and standard IT networks with tighter access controls. That means what FBI did not do that made this attack to be possible is that FBI did not have a strict segmentation that segmented between classified information with unclassified information. When we say classified, you know what it means. Secret information. Information that is not supposed to be made open to the public. You understand? They didn't have strict segmentation on such. You see, we also have strict segmentation between sensitive and classified information. When we say sensitive now, is that this information are sensitive, but they are not classified. That means if people have access to it, it can cause sensitive now. If people have access to it, it can cause uproar and all that. Maybe it can make a maybe a citizen to actually it can cause a lot of issues. But classified means that when people have access to it, it can disrupt national unity, can disrupt national democracy, and so on and so forth. So those were these protocol that they did not have in place that made this particular attack to be successful. You understand? So that's for that. So the next attack is the Dodge Social Security Administration. So this particular one also affected a government agency in the United States, and it dislodged through 2026. And the person that was behind it, or those that were behind it, were internal whistleblower. That was how it was alleged. And the harm and cause was a live copy of the SSA database. That means the Social Security Administration, a live copy of their database was made public, exposing the SSN of most living Americans allegedly moved to an unsecured third-party server, and caused potentially the largest breach in the US history. You see what this actually may look like now, that this particular breach or cyber breach or data breach now, currently at the moment, it is reputed to be the largest breach in the US history. Do you know why? Social security number is like you and all connected to you. It can be used to access your bank account, can be used to access everything about you. That's what social security number is. And from the reports that I was actually gathered is that the SSN of most living Americans, not dead Americans, they don't pay tax, no death benefits, so their SSN may not actually have much use or much benefit to whoever. But those who are alive, they're still paying tax, so people can illegally file for their tax return, for their tax refund using their SSN. Because SSN is not something that anybody should have access to except the owner. You understand? So what were the root cause and the negligence is that production data was moved to unvetted infrastructure with no data governance sign off. That means, data migration with ICT, there will always be data migration, either for security reasons, for upgrade, for compliance reasons, or whatever. There will always be data migration. But data migration was not the issue. The issue was that this data was migrated or they were moved to an unvetted infrastructure, either maybe to an unvetted server, an unvetted database, and so on and so forth. And there was also no data governance sign off. That means there was no sign that, okay, this data, we have moved it to this particular infrastructure. So it is the owner of this infrastructure that should not be in charge of such protecting it henceforth. And if anything should happen to those data, the owner of those infrastructure should not be the one that should be held responsible for such. There were no such on it. So two things were actually what were the root cause of this particular incident. Now, what could have prevented it, or what was the first thing that, if it was put in place, it would have actually what prevented this particular incident? One was mandatory data governance approval before any production data leaves a controlled infrastructure. It would have been a mandatory governance approval, but there was no approval. And also that was actually what led to this particular incident. So guys, that's why we'll draw the curtain for this particular cybersecurity attacks in retrospect in the first half of 2026. We're going to be continuing this session. This is not all that we have about 30 incidents that we're going to be looking at, and we've looked at just 5. We have about 30 incidents that we're going to be looking at. We have the Instagram incident that happened, the password reset logic bug. We have the ID should passport exposure and the rest of them. So do want to stay tuned, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. Do want to like this